Are you looking to sell your house as is without the hassle of costly repairs or realtor fees? Then
answers to those questions. But there is, you know, whilst Donald Trump could be commended for taking out Nicolas Maduro, a man who was illegitimate, many people saw within his own country, there's also the possibility that it leads to far greater turmoil and chaos going forwards.
Yeah, scary times. Alex, thank you. Well, if you're just tuning our way, a reminder of our top story today. The ousted Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife have arrived at court in New York to face charges including narco-terrorism conspiracy. The couple have been taken from the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn to the court building in Manhattan. The transfer happened in front of the full glare of the cameras, both travelling by road and by helicopter. Well, as you can see here, the ousted Venezuelan leader was handcuffed as he was transferred from a heavily armoured vehicle to another car. He was then taken to a helicopter along with his wife, Sila Flores, who you can see in front of him there, taken to a helicopter to be flown on to Manhattan, just a short helicopter ride from Brooklyn across the water onto the island of Manhattan itself. And there is him arriving after that short flight. The deposed president and his wife remained handcuffed as they were helped out of the helicopter by DEA agents. Another step towards their appearance in court, being encouraged to duck their heads from the rotors of that helicopter. And they remained heavily flanked by guards as they were transferred into an armoured car for the final part of the journey to the courthouse. This is the scene outside the courthouse at the moment there, New York's federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. In New York also for us today, our US correspondent James Matthews, who's been keeping an eye across proceedings. James, it's around 5 p.m. UK time, isn't it, that we're expecting the court proceedings to get underway proper. Just talk us through what has happened so far today.
Yeah, hi, Jane. We saw the early morning departure from the Metropolitan Detention Center. Notorious, I think it's fair to use that word to describe that particular facility, much criticized for unsafe, insanitary conditions. These are the surroundings that Nicolas Maduro finds himself in, has done for the past 48 hours. It was a journey, as you saw, of the tightest security, driven to what was a football field, soccer as they would call it here, and that helicopter made the journey across the East River underneath the Manhattan skyline, within sight of the Statue of Liberty, landing on a helipad just on the banks of the East River, and thereafter a short journey in the armoured Bearcat towards Lower Manhattan, this courthouse, which, you know, has seen high-profile cases in the past. I was covering the civil case where Donald Trump was the accused in a case of sexual abuse. Harvey Weinstein has been in this courthouse. Also, those accused of the 9/11 attacks, and indeed those accused of 9/11 attacks were dealt with by a Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein, 92 years old, Bill Clinton appointed. He's the man who will take care of this arraignment hearing in a few hours' time for Maduro and his wife, Sila Flores. It should be fairly short. Typically, an accused is read the charges against them. There are a number faced.
Hey, would you like to know how to safeguard your assets from aggressive attorneys, tenants, or unforeseen creditors? Would you like to have peace of mind knowing your wealth or business is protected? Well, let me...
Assumes if that happens, it will be a not guilty on the part of Maduro. We might hear some sense, we might not, of the legal basis on which he thinks he should not be here. And we have heard that case, haven't we, from a number of people, Venezuela's political representatives, those representatives left in place behind him, talking about an operation that they termed as an atrocity, saying that it was a breach of international law, saying that there should be protections against a foreign country launching an incursion of any type into a sovereign state. That's an argument, actually, that will play out a bit further up the road here at the UN Security Council. Discussion is due to begin there at 10 a.m. local time in an hour or two. So there is a lot going on in terms of the politics, domestically and internationally. On Capitol Hill, Congress representatives coming back to work after the festive break today. They are making the point, many of them, opponents of the Trump administration, that they should have been notified of this action, that it was wrong and illegal for a US president to act on a unilateral basis as they see it. So that's the kind of political framing of the discussion this morning, Jane. But come midday, it all comes down to courtroom number 26A, when accused and co-accused will appear before the judge. Very much routine in terms of the legal process. It's interesting, Jane, a White House official has been talking this morning, unnamed, following reports over the weekend, actually, that it was the dancing, it was the public persona of Nicolas Maduro that did it for him in the end, that so offended Donald Trump that he instructed the action to proceed to capture him. This official saying that his overt arrogance, to quote him, which included rejecting multiple offers to surrender and regular public dancing. And we've seen video of Nicolas Maduro doing a kind of souped-up version of the Donald Trump YMCA dance. This clearly offended the president, according to this White House official, and that persuaded some within the president's team, we're told, that Maduro would not leave Caracas, Venezuela, on his own. This same official, he's talking about Trump and Rubio's comments over the weekend about running the country. And this official says the oil embargo will remain until the US demands are met. He says the US has now been placed in a position of maximum leverage, where we'll continue to make demands of the Venezuelan government that align with the interests of both the American and Venezuelan people. So there you go. The Americans today, as they did over the weekend, very much taking this posture that they are in charge and that Venezuela will do as they say. And in terms of that oil embargo, the tactic clearly is to choke Venezuela's wealth. And we wait to see how that will go down inside that country. You know, having got rid of one so-called dictator, they are very much being dictated to by the Americans, and how that goes down will be key in terms of stability and how this plays out politically.
Absolutely will, James. Thank you very much. Well, James, talking about oil, the US president's plans to run Venezuela's oil industry. It could take years and could cost billions of dollars, of course. Our business correspondent, Paul Kelso, has been taking a look.
Donald Trump has been unambiguous that Venezuelan oil and the commercial opportunity it represents for American companies were a primary reason for the removal of President Maduro. And that's because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on Earth, an estimated 300 billion barrels lying untapped. That's about 17% of global reserves, and it's more than Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and more than 3 times the reserves in the United States. Now, the bulk of it lies in the central Orinoco belt, south of the Orinoco River, in oil fields that cover around 50,000 square kilometers. And it's not just how much oil is here, but the type that matters. It is extra heavy crude oil. It's used for making diesel, asphalt, and as a raw material in petrochemicals. Because it's highly viscous, thick and sticky, it's more complex to extract, and it requires refinement. But crucially, while the US doesn't have large reserves of this heavy crude, it does have lots of the refineries required to deal with it. Now, despite these massive reserves, Venezuelan production is relatively puny, and it's been in decline. In the 60s and 70s, when American oil companies controlled the industry, it produced more than 3.5 million barrels a day. That was around 7% of global output. But following the election of Hugo Chavez, the industry was nationalized, assets of those American companies were seized, and production fell. It declined further under President Maduro, particularly after the imposition of sanctions in 2019. And today, Venezuela produces less than 1 million barrels a day. Now, given there are sanctions in place, it's worth asking where those barrels of oil end up. And this chart shows these are exports from Venezuela in the last year, and the bulk goes to China, much of it under exemption to repay historic loans. But the balance goes to the United States, despite the sanctions. Now, Donald Trump says US oil companies will spend billions to reverse the decline in Venezuelan production, but it will not happen overnight. And these pictures, shot by Sky News in 2019, tell us why. Venezuela's oil infrastructure has declined through a chronic lack of investment. And there's been a brain drain from the domestic industry under Maduro too. Consultants Wood Mackenzie estimate that every additional 500,000 barrels of output from these fields will require $15 to $20 billion of investment to return them to production. Now, for a sense of how long it might take to increase that production, we can look to a previous episode of US adventurism, the removal of Saddam Hussein from Iraq. This chart shows the war with Iran and the first Gulf War dented production. But after the US-led invasion in 2003, production has tripled, but it's taken 20 years and, of course, come at an enormous cost to regional stability. The more immediate question is what impact regime change, uncertainty over who is really in charge in Caracas. Now, the US seizure of Venezuelan tankers before Christmas had a limited impact on the oil price. In fact, you can see it's down more than 20% in the last year as global economies have slowed, demand has decreased, and there's actually oversupply. It may be that the prospect of a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine will have far more impact on the oil price than the promise of more Venezuelan crude in decades to come. And whatever happens to these markets in the short term, the broader question of whether American involvement will benefit the Venezuelan people and have their consent or amount to a colonial asset grab, that will take longer to resolve.
Paul Kelso there. Well, joining me now is AJ Palmer, Director of Oil Markets at Independent Commodity Intelligence Services. AJ, really good to get your thoughts about this today. So Paul spelled out how significant Venezuela is currently to the world oil markets, but how much more significant could it be if it was run better?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on, and this very much is an important question, of course. Look, Venezuela is and isn't important to the oil market. As Paul mentioned, yes, it has significant oil reserves, the largest oil reserves in the world of around 300 billion barrels. But ultimately, its actual production levels are, again, as Paul mentions, below a million barrels per day. That makes it quite a low oil producer. For reference, the US produces around 20 million barrels of crude and NGLs. So a lot of liquids production from other countries there, not so much from Venezuela. Now, over time, if there is a significant amount of investment in Venezuela's oil infrastructure, and that will only come if there is political stability within its new administration, then Venezuelan oil supply could increase quite significantly. And the analogy there with Iraq's oil production increase over time, I think, is a good one. We could realistically see, doubling, tripling, even quadrupling or more of Venezuela's oil production, but that will take a significant amount of time to achieve.
Well, you say a significant amount of time. I mean, we think back, to the Iraq War, we're looking back over a 20-year period, aren't we? How long do you think it would take to revamp Venezuela's ailing oil industry?
You could probably see a reasonable increase in Venezuela's oil supply this year and next. To get Chevron is already operating in the country, and so to get a small increase, it probably wouldn't require a huge amount of additional investment and changes within the country to achieve. But to get to back over 3 million barrels per day, which would be a significant oil production level, that will be over a 5 to 7, potentially even longer year period to achieve. And that's when really we would probably see a major increase in the impact of Venezuela's oil supply on oil markets. Until then, we probably wouldn't see a major impact as a result of this US incursion into Venezuela.
Yeah, because when we look at the impact on the oil price, as we saw from that graph, it doesn't appear to have been especially significant. It hasn't shot up or dropped to an enormous extent, has it?
No, that's absolutely correct. And to be honest, it's what we would expect in this sort of situation, because ultimately nothing has really changed on the ground right now. The US is still implying that it will continue with its blockade on Venezuelan exports. Supply on the ground isn't going to change immediately anytime soon. So ultimately, whilst there are some risks to Venezuela's oil production being taken offline in the very near term, in the next few weeks or month or so, because of this blockade continuing, realistically, there is a major oil supply glut generally for 2026 expected across the globe. And that is going to exert more downward pressure on the oil price than this Venezuela situation. So irrespective of this situation, we see prices going down to the downside in the coming few weeks and months.
Talk to us about the heavy variety of crude oil that Venezuela has. Again, Paul touched on it in his piece. This oil is of particular value to the US. How easy is it, for example, to transport this oil, to process it? Because that's the issue, isn't it? It needs processing.
It does need processing. It also needs extracting in the first instance. And again, as Paul mentioned, it is heavy, thick, sour oil, which is very difficult to extract, or relatively difficult to extract. And it is more difficult to transport and to process, etc. But the US refineries are actually set up to process heavier grades of crude oil. This sort of crude oil that Venezuela produces is perfect for US oil refineries. Interestingly, US itself produces a wide range of crude oil grades, but a lot of light crude oil. And so it has to export significant quantities of the oil that it produces in the US and import heavy crude oil from other countries like Canada, Mexico, and elsewhere. Having access to Venezuelan oil does mean that this would be an advantage to US oil refineries, and it could potentially help to lower costs to some degree. But again, the volumes are very small from Venezuela right now. It will take a number of years for those increased quantities to really have a material positive impact for the US oil refining system.
And just taking a step back a little bit from this decision, what's been very clear from President Trump and his politics is that he is a fan of fossil fuels. He believes in that is the future of energy, of electricity, of fueling the demand for products in the rest of the world. What impact does this have on renewable technologies? Do you think this cements oil and things like it in terms of investment for the future?
I mean, ultimately, it probably doesn't have a major impact on that system overall. If we think about the more kind of medium and long-term impact of this incursion into Venezuela, the impact is that there will be a lot more oil coming out of Venezuela over time if the investment comes and if there is political stability within the country. That could mean that oil prices fall over time because significant volumes of extra supply does mean lower oil prices. And that might actually mean that we keep oil around for a little bit longer. And instead of moving away to renewables, which are typically cheaper, we stick around with oil for a little bit longer. But I don't think this specific incursion necessarily means that there will be a major shift away from renewables or towards. I think overall it depends on other policies and investment into renewables that will really determine whether or not the world moves away into the energy transition over time.
Really interesting stuff. AJ Palmer, Director of Oil Markets, thanks so much for talking to us. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, we're going to have the very latest from New York as the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife prepare to stand trial in this building in Lower Manhattan this afternoon.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu?
In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians.
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from the UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr Walker, you're anti-abortion, but two women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the president? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents based in Washington, D.C. David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
Come on. Yeah, you. They don't come after me. You know that. I'm Latino American. You're a white guy. They don't care. They come after me, bro. He's amazing. You know what I have? Drive around, nice safe, look like they can stop you. We go down to the Supreme. Is that okay? I did. Who gives a fuck? Guys, communication. Oh yeah.
Heard from the legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg about the potential ramifications for the Trump administration following its actions in Venezuela.
International law bans invading another country and capturing its president. Article 2 of the United Nations Charter says all members shall refrain.
Most auto insurers love when you have two cars, and they love it even more when you have a driveway full, because they get to charge
Integrity or political independence of any state. Now, the United Nations can authorize the use of force, but it hasn't done so here. There is the right of self-defense, but that applies only if an armed attack occurs against a member state. Now, whatever President Trump may argue, I think that would be quite a stretch, but nevertheless, that is the traditional view, that is the orthodox view of international law. You can't simply go into somebody else's country unless you can justify acting in the defense of yourself or indeed other countries. I suspect he'll be in custody while he's awaiting trial, and there seems to be evidence that Venezuela has certainly been responsible for these actions, and if that can be attributed to him personally, then I think it's very likely that that's not how states are meant to act. If you want somebody who you accuse of breaking your own law, then you normally seek their extradition. Now, the United States can say, well, we can't seek Maduro's extradition from Venezuela because they simply wouldn't agree to hand him over. Whether that justifies them going in and is another matter. They would say it's their only option. They are saying that this is not so much an international fight, but a fight against an individual. They accuse him of what's described as narco-terrorism. Certainly, he has a lot to answer for, and I don't think anybody's very sorry to see him go. But if you want a strict view of international law, then I think it is rather difficult to justify.
Joshua Rosenberg there on the legal ramifications of President Trump's actions over the weekend. Well, you're watching Sky News today. Coming up, we will bring you all the latest from New York as we await the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife for their arraignment hearing in front of this court later on this afternoon. All the reaction to that and all the rest of the day's news as well. Don't go anywhere.
This is point is actually behind not here. No, we're not allowed, right? Okay. Here we maybe we cannot Oh yeah, I am. Oh yeah, you just throw some security. I got it. I do have one. This is little things like beautiful.
We begin in New York, where the ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife have arrived at court to face charges including narco-terrorism conspiracy. The couple have been taken from the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn to the court building in Manhattan. The transfer happened in the full glare of the cameras. Both were transported together by both helicopter and road. Well, as you can see here, the ousted Venezuelan leader was handcuffed as he was transferred from a heavily armoured vehicle at the Federal Detention Centre to another car for the first part of his journey. He was then transferred to a helicopter to be flown the short distance from Brooklyn, where this detention centre is, across the water to Manhattan Island proper, where the court is. And after this short flight, the deposed president and his wife, Sila Flores, remained handcuffed. They were helped down from the helicopter, encouraged to duck because of the rotors above it, and they were helped by DEA agents. Another step towards their appearance in court. And they continue to be heavily flanked by these Drug Enforcement Agency officials as they were transferred into an armoured car for the final part of their journey to New York's federal courthouse. And this is the scene outside the court. Right now, our US correspondent James Matthews is there for us and has the latest.
I suppose it was a judgment call, wasn't it? Do you transport him early, beat the traffic, and listen, we're in the heart of New York, so there is sense and security in that. Do you increase the danger by taking him too early? You know, should it be a quick in and out? They've gone for option A, and that's why we saw him traveling in the relatively early hours. A difficult journey in many ways across the East River. I mean, it's one of the busiest thoroughfares anywhere in the world on a Monday morning, the first week in January. So roads were closed off and the helicopter clearly was deemed to be the best option. They have some experience and knowledge of transporting high-profile prisoners. For El Chapo, the drug runner, he was in the same MDC facility, came in the same direction towards Lower Manhattan. They closed the Brooklyn Bridge for him. They took a different route this time. It was quick and it afforded the photo opportunity as well, didn't it, Jane? And I think that this is a key part in all of this. It's why we're seeing pictures of Nicolas Maduro and his co-accused, his wife, Celia Flores, at every turn. The Trump administration is very pleased, satisfied with the way this operation has played out, and presenting him in public is a badge of pride in many ways for them. Photo opportunities at regular intervals to reinforce the fact that this is an operation they regard as a success and that they very much stand behind and want to present to the public on a regular and repeated basis as the way the Trump operation operates. It's a reminder to the public at large. It's also a reminder to other countries. And bear in mind, other countries appear to be very much in the frame in all of this. We had Donald Trump riffing on his way back from Florida aboard Air Force One, almost a checklist of countries who now might be in his sights. Last night, he spoke about Colombia in an interview of the weekend. He spoke about Greenland. We still want Greenland. That prompted considerable anger in Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, and, you know, the Danish government saying, look, this is unacceptable. It is a breach of international law. You know, the government of Denmark reasserting its partial ownership of that territory. So all sorts of questions clearly about where this all goes from here politically and in terms of military action, frankly. But I suppose right now inside a New York courtroom, 23A, in front of Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein at midday Eastern Time, Jane, it all comes down to what will be a routine, regular court case, court hearing, an arraignment hearing, a regular hearing. But, of course, there is much about this that is highly irregular.
Indeed. Well, earlier we heard from the legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg about the potential ramifications for the Trump administration following the actions over the weekend.
International law bans invading another country and capturing its president. Article 2 of the United Nations Charter says all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Now, the United Nations can authorize the use of force, but it hasn't done so here. There is the right of self-defense, but that applies only if an armed attack occurs against a member state. Now, whatever President Trump may argue, I think that would be quite a stretch, but nevertheless, that is the traditional view, that is the orthodox view of international law. You can't simply go into somebody else's country unless you can justify acting in the defense of yourself or indeed other countries. I suspect he'll be in custody while he's awaiting trial, and there seems to be evidence that Venezuela has certainly been responsible for these actions, and if that can be attributed to him personally, then I think it's very likely that he will be convicted and sentenced to prison. Of course, that's not how states are meant to act. If you want somebody who you accuse of breaking your own law, then you normally seek their extradition. Now, the United States can say, well, we can't seek Maduro's extradition from Venezuela because they simply wouldn't agree to hand him over. Whether that justifies them going in and getting him is another matter. They would say it's their only option. They are saying that this is not so much an international fight, but a fight against an individual. They accuse him of what's described as narco-terrorism. Certainly, he has a lot to answer for, and I don't think anybody's very sorry to see him go. But if you want a strict view of international law, then I think it is rather difficult to justify.
Well, a number of world leaders are also accusing Donald Trump of violating international law by carrying out the special operation. The American president has responded by making threats about taking action in other parts of the world, including Greenland and Colombia, describing Gustavo Petro as a sick man. Here's what he had to say to reporters on board Air Force One.
Now, we have a very sick neighbor. It's not a neighbor, but it's close to a neighbor, and that's Venezuela. It's very sick. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
it sounds good to me. Yeah. You know why? Because they kill a lot of people. Yeah.
Secretary Rubio mentioned Cuba yesterday in his remarks. Does the U.S. have a plan to do?
Well, Cuba always survived because of Venezuela. Now they won't have that money coming in. They won't have the income coming in. You know, a lot of Cubans were killed yesterday. You know that. A lot of Cubans were killed.
You know how many?
The bodyguards. No, they're looking, but there was a lot of death on the other side. No death on our side, but there was a lot of death on the other side, unfortunately. But a lot of Cubans were killed yesterday, trying to protect him.
There's been protesters killed in Iran. You said we were locked and loaded, ready to go. What is the line there for when the U.S. is going to get involved in those protests?
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States. It's not just Venezuela. It's what's coming out of Venezuela in the form of ocean-going and Gulf-going and sea-going boats. Every time we knock out a boat, and we've done a lot of them, we did 3 over the last few days, they're very rare now. You don't see too many of them. But drugs by sea are down 97%. Think of that. And now we're going to stop them by land, too. The land is easy. We had to do the sea before we did the land because it just works out.
Yeah, you were just talking about the land, but it sounded like you
and by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it. But unfortunately, the cartels are very strong in Mexico.
I remember one time you actually, speaking of Mexico, I asked you about Claudia Sheinbaum, and you told me at one point you had offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to combat drug trafficking there. Is that something you have spoken to her about?
I think she's a terrific person. I would say every single time I talk to her, I offered to send troops.
And she's just not willing?
She's concerned. She's a little afraid. The cartels are running Mexico. Whether you like it or not, it's not nice to say, but the cartels are running Mexico.
Yeah, speaking of those U.S. troops, I mean, one thing that Americans and a lot of people are wondering, you just sounded like you weighed out another strike, another land strike, at least in Venezuela. You sound like you weighed that out. But
well, we didn't need it. We were prepared to do a second strike if we needed it. We're totally prepared.
But that's off
we're
the
still
table.
prepared.
That's off the table now.
No, it's not. If they don't behave, we will do a second strike.
The question is that the American troops, are they going to be on the ground? They're doing any kind of peacekeeping? I think Americans are very...
It depends on what happens. It depends a little bit on the new administration, if you want to call it
So
that.
if you see that pushback from Rodriguez and ultimately...
Well, I don't think there was pushback. I think that,
she
frankly,
called it...
well, you hear a different person than I hear.
Really? So you have spoken with her?
We talked to them, yeah.
Oh, you did speak?
They've been very good.
Because she called it kidnapping of Maduro.
It's all right. It's not a bad term. Go ahead.
Now, are you going to demand that Delcy Rodriguez let opposition figures return or free any political prisoners?
How long it takes a beginner like my dad to go from beer belly to get ripped again with Tai Chi.
How old is your father?
He is 56.
Oh, perfect. By the end of November, you won't even recognize him.
But what if he hasn't worked out in years?
That's even better. Tai Chi was built for men 40 plus.
Isn't the gym better after 40?
The gym breaks you. Tai Chi will make you feel better and lose weight faster than in your 20s.
Does he need any equipment?
No, his body is enough. Just do it for 9 minutes a day.
On Venezuela broke international law. He says it's up to the United States to set out its justification for the action. The Prime Minister was talking to our political editor, Beth Rigby.
Prime Minister, has US action in Venezuela violated international law?
Well, the most important thing in Venezuela is a transition to democracy, a peaceful transition. Now, that was our position before the weekend. It remains our position. And in relation to the illegitimate president of Venezuela, there aren't going to be many tears shed.
No, but
I do think the framework, the anchor has to be international law,
Right.
as you'd expect me to say. The situation is complicated. It's even complicated today. And obviously the US will want to justify its
But has
actions.
it violated international law?
Well, the
That's
framework
my
has to be international law. It's a complicated situation. The most important thing at the moment is that peaceful transition to democracy.
PM, France, Spain, Canada, Germany, as well as the UN Secretary General, have all said that the US has violated international law. Has the US violated international law?
Well, international law is really important. It's the framework, and it's for the US to set out its justifications for the actions that it's taken. But it is a complicated situation. It remains a complicated
So you're not
situation.
going to say whether you think
the
they
most
have or
important
haven't?
thing, most important thing is stability and that peaceful transition to democracy. That's what matters to Venezuela above all else. And that was the position we took before the weekend. It's still our position
So
now.
you're not going to say whether you think they have or haven't, just to be clear.
I'm going to be clear that I believe in international law. I've long been an advocate for international law. I'm absolutely clear that
But
is
you
the
won't call
framework
this
that
out.
applies.
Okay.
Obviously, it'll be for the US to set out their justification in relation to the action
Okay,
that they have taken.
You don't want to call it out. Can you just reiterate then to our Danish allies that you would condemn Trump going into Greenland, just to be clear?
Well, let me be really clear about Greenland. The future of Greenland is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark is a close European ally, a close NATO ally, and the future, therefore, has to be for Greenland, for the Kingdom of Denmark, and only for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. And we're absolutely clear about that.
The Danish Prime Minister's told Trump to stop the threats about Greenland. Do you agree with her?
Well, I'd stand with her.
Okay.
And she's right about the future of Greenland.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Rob, clear that the Prime Minister is standing behind the leadership of Greenland and Denmark, but also clear that he hasn't spoken to President Trump. What do you make of that in terms of the jolly, friendly old alliance that's meant to be between the two countries?
Well, I think privately, the UK government probably would have wanted to have had a phone call with President Trump by now. On Saturday, when Keir Starmer was asked about the situation and events overnight in Venezuela, he said that he wanted to speak to Donald Trump because he wanted to establish the facts, and then only then would he be able to come to a more sort of firm conclusion about what he felt about that mission and where it may lie in terms of international law. But no, he hasn't spoken to Donald Trump. I think the most likely moment at which he will have that conversation actually may be in a day or so's time, after a big meeting that's going on in Paris tomorrow, primarily focused on Ukraine. What has tended to have happened is that after those primarily European meetings around the Coalition of the Willing, as it's called, there is a phone call organised to sort of relay what happened back to the president. And I think you'd expect the situation in Venezuela to be brought up on a phone call like that as well. It doesn't help with those accusations that Sir Keir Starmer has been left out of the loop on this one. You've got the Conservatives essentially making those accusations that he doesn't really have much to say and he hasn't really got anything to do with what went on and doesn't know much about any of it. It's not helped by the fact that he hasn't spoken to Donald Trump. It's also not helped by the fact that the government is doing its best to say as little as possible on the specifics of that extraction of Nicolas Maduro in Caracas 2 days or so ago, not wanting to make any comments about whether it is in line with international law, rather pointing towards the US and saying it's for the US to set out the legal justification for it. A moment where that could potentially happen is later today at the UN Security Council. Look, if there's any kind of vote, though, it will be interesting to see what the UK does. Some reporting in newspapers overnight that the UK could abstain on any vote that condemned that mission or said that it was in breach of international law. There are obviously huge diplomatic considerations at play here. The UK not wanting to anger Donald Trump, wanting to keep Donald Trump on side. The risks, of course, though, are the domestic political risks of the Prime Minister just looking a bit weak. And then the secondary risks, I guess, of other Western allies who are being more spiky in their tone towards Donald Trump, wondering why the UK is being so cagey. On that, though, I think the Prime Minister has gone a bit further when it comes to Greenland and those repeated suggestions from Donald Trump that the US could annex that Danish territory because of its strategic importance and because of the mineral wealth that it has. The Prime Minister saying that he stands with the Danish Prime Minister. She, of course, said pretty explicitly and straightforwardly to Donald Trump that he needed to stop the threats towards Greenland. I think if we did get in a position where the US were doing something in terms of Greenland, that would put leaders like Sir Keir Starmer in a pretty remarkable position where they were almost forced to choose between European allies and allies in the US.
Rob, thank you. This is Sky News Today. Coming
Que no te va a pasar porque tengo que salir para Colombia.
do not pay your next car insurance bill. Repeat, do not pay your bill yet.
So I found this website and
yo parlo español y penso que l'italiano è mejor para mí que el francés. No.